Okay. So, when we were talking about maybe what to address in our parent night, Miss Merida, who is out of town, said, what if we just like got one of the higher, what's the word? Recommended books, I guess, for parenting, and we all read it as a counseling team, and then we discussed it and then presented it. And I was like, well, that's kind of a fun idea. So this was one that it was just highly recommended or highly received, I guess, online. And I am familiar with Daniel Siegel. You guys might be also. He's a neuroscientist. So it's by Daniel Siegel and Tina Payne Bryson. We ordered the books, and every time we order anything, our amazing finance person in our office, Jessica Bentley, who's awesome, she's so great and she's so on it that she stamps everything with property of GWA. So when we ordered them for you guys and we got them, we're like, oh, Jessica, she's so amazing. But, so don't worry, it is your property. We're sorry that it's stamped. That's just kind of our process, and so we were like, oh shoot, so just cross that out and enjoy your book. It is a gift from GWA. So anyway, we all read this as a counseling team and wanted to just kind of present some ideas to you guys, but what we thought also was it would be kind of nice to learn from each other tonight, to kind of have a little bit of sharing and discussion. So we're really hoping that you can also be a part of this, because I think as parents we have a lot to share with each other, and we have a lot of insight and wisdom that we can really glean from each other, and so we were hoping to kind of build a little bit of a discussion tonight. So what I did really love about this book, he's a neuroscientist, and he talks a lot about how the brain, including adults, but really children's brains, are very malleable, right? Very ready to be molded and very adaptable to learning and experience. And so because their brains are constantly wiring and rewiring, there's a lot we can do to really develop the brain in a healthy way, or even change or alter development of the brain if things were wired in a way that was maybe with an unhealthy experience, which I think is a really hopeful reality, and it's based in science. So I love that like there's a lot we can do to change pathways that have been created, or to create really great healthy pathways in our kids. How we create those pathways is through experience. So our brains learn through experiences, and repetitive experiences, or things that are repeated, create really strong pathways for us. That can be a great thing, and it can be a thing we need to kind of fix or undo if we've had some connection that's reoccurring for a child that's kind of created a connection that's unhealthy. So he talks about, I say he, but obviously it's two authors. They both talk about the brain having a horizontal direction and also vertical. So we'll talk about that. So horizontally, he talks about the left and right brain. We're all familiar with that. Sometimes there's rhetoric of like people are left or right brained, like you're left brained. That's really not a thing. Like everyone has some left brain, everyone has some right brain. Your brain really integrates and works together on almost anything you're doing. But there is a little bit of, science that supports that, like the left brain is more like you're logical, it's more literal, it's kind of the area of the brain where you're making lists, or you're planning, you're organizing or sequencing. It's very linear, it's very verbal. So the left brain likes words, direct communication. Right brain is more experiential, right? It's more that hands-on, what you experience, what you see. It's more visual. It likes pictures and representation. It's picking up on more nonverbal, like facial and body language, than it is words. And it's really a lot of your connection and relationship and emotional area. So left and right brain, obviously they're both super important. In the book, it focuses a lot on while we parent and while we engage with our kids, we need to keep in mind that these areas are both very important, and a balance between the two is key. So while we're like either disciplining or teaching or correcting, we need to bring in both of these. We need to bring in that emotional piece, and we're going to talk about how to do that, And we need to bring in that logical and left brain piece and really kind of integrate those together. If you're doing one or the other, it's not as like thorough or I guess holistic for that child's brain as maybe we could be. And then he talks about the upstairs brain and the downstairs brain. I like that the book kind of creates this in a way that even kids can understand. In our school, we have taught this to our kids. A lot of your kids might even know if you say to them, you know, this is upstairs when you flip your lid, and here's your downstairs brain. They kind of know that. Some of them know this because we've taught them a lot that like your amygdala can get, you know, when you flip your lid, then your frontal lobe kind of moves and your amygdala is in charge. So it's that upstairs and downstairs brain, and your downstairs kind of takes over. So our kids kind of know some of this, but the upstairs brain would really be kind of that frontal lobe, that thinking brain, that self-awareness, problem solving. This is your executive functioning, where you think ahead, you have consequential thinking, and it's where you control your impulses, control your urges, and the downstairs brain is more of like your survival brain, more of that like amygdala area where it's built to respond before thinking, it's built to act, to keep you safe before you think. So an amazing part of the brain, right, where it keeps us safe if we need to hurry and respond and react quickly to an emergency or crisis without even thinking. So it's really incredible. It's your instinct, it's your gut reaction, it's kind of that impulse response. It's very safety focused, and it's very focused on getting your needs met. So both of these are really important. There's nothing in the brain that's like, you know, not more valuable than the other, right? None of these parts are less valuable, left, right, or upstairs or downstairs. They're all super important and super incredible what the brain is doing. But you can imagine that if these are all working together, we're gonna have a lot more of a healthy response in life to a lot of things than if we are really kind of stuck in impulsive responding or focusing just on our needs getting met, or if we're not incorporating some of this and so we're not thinking about safety and if that's not really engaging.
Okay. So in this book, Dr. Siegel and Tina Bryson, they talk about the canoe example. They talk about how our mental health is like visually, like picture yourself like floating peacefully through a country river down the middle in a canoe, and how like peaceful, and that's kind of like, that represents our mental health and how we are at one with the world and we feel like things are going well. And then there's two banks, one on each side. One is like extremely chaotic, and the other one on the other side is extremely rigid, and there's not a lot of flexibility and adaptability to it. And sometimes we will veer to one side or the other. And so how it's important for our mental health to be able to stay in the middle, and how it's important to just kind of have that middle ground. Let's see. So the right bank is chaos, extreme emotional reactivity. The left bank is rigidity and extreme control and lack of adaptability. Okay, so I want you to think about, where do you naturally float? Which way are you pulled when you are stressed? So I want you to turn and talk to a neighbor, get to know our friends here at GWA.
Probably not rigid since I am stressed.
It depends on what kind of stress we're talking about. If it's like,
I can't fix
this
that.
is kind of like that I say for general. If it's like stress
That one thing.
of like something else stress me, like if it's like
Maybe like emergency. First, fourth grade.
You're like talking like common strangers. Good. Seemed like you did not know each other.
I was looking at the list, like everything order, I was like, yeah, I need to read more,
You will though, as they get older,
Yeah.
they find me more flexible with the time.
Okay, wrap up your conversations. I think that I heard some really good conversations out there. It's kind of interesting as parents to kind of evaluate our own sense of self and where we are at. Are we more emotional or are we more logical? Where do we fit? It's important to remember that our kids also have their own river that they're going through, and that they have their own little canoe, and they will bump from side to side quite a bit. And it's kind of our job as parents to kind of try and help them balance both, right? The right side and the left side of the brain, so that they can have healthy and strong mental health. Okay, let's see what's next. Okay, so what does balance look like? In this book, they talk about how integration is the heart of this book. It's the key of the book. This is, it looks generally like being in a good relationship with the world around you. You have clear understanding of yourself, other people in your life. You can be flexible and you can adjust when situations change. You are emotionally stable, organized in your thoughts, and at peace. And so it talks about how important it is to help your children become integrated. And what integration in this book means is that you're integrating both the left and the right side, and the upstairs and the downstairs brain. You're making links so that they process as a whole. So that's really important, and they talk about it throughout the entire book. Connection. So connect first with the right brain. So what this means is like when your kid might be having some struggles, or they might be, having a hard time, that it's so important to connect with that right brain and to validate the experience. In the book, there's a passage where it talks about how even when it doesn't make any sense to you as a parent why they're losing their mind because there's no more orange popsicles in the freezer or whatever it is, that their emotions are important to them, and it's important for us as parents to validate those emotions and the experiences that they've been through, which are super important to them. It's also important to teach your children to label their emotions. This helps them expand their emotional vocabulary so that they can understand what they're feeling. So if you help them, yes.
So one thing that for young kids, we bought what's called the spot books.
Oh yes.
So
Yes. For anger,
everybody's not-
yes.
Everybody knows that one.
No, that's
No.
such
Thank
great.
you
If you've
for
never
sharing.
seen the spot books, it's a set, and it goes. Each book is a different emotion. It's so good.
It's a book that references emotion to a color, and each spot is a color. So, like for our son who gets angry at times when he was 2, he was able to say, "I have a red spot right now." How big is your red spot?
Yeah.
How big? I love it.
Yeah.
Right, that's so amazing. It gives them the vocabulary to express how they feel and to help others understand them.
Right.
Yeah.
And
It's amazing.
each book ends with, okay, this is what the spot is, this is what you're feeling, and how can we calm ourselves down and get rid of our red spot or blue spot and bring in the green peaceful spot. So it's-
Love it. Thank you.
There's another thing called the emotion wheel. You guys can
Yes.
see. There's a lot of words on that wheel, and it's in the colors as well. So if you look that up on Google, that's very helpful too.
Yes.
Yes, you can get it on a pillow.
Yeah.
I have it hanging in my office on like a tapestry. The great thing with the emotion wheel is that the inside of the wheel is those main words we hear a lot, like sad, angry, happy. But what the emotion wheel does is then help your kid expand those. Like, well, let's talk more about sad and what that could be. And then let's talk even deeper about, well, what does that mean? So it's really great. It's got taking those basic feeling words and expanding their vocabulary into like other words and helping them understand what's really underneath that emotion. Let's give more words to this. That's a great tool. Yeah.
I have another thought about emotions. I have a friend who's a therapist, and she's really taught me a lot this past year that emotions are not good or bad. Emotions are information, and we need to use that information to process it and then move forward. Like make a decision on that and move forward. So I think that's good to consider too.
Absolutely.
In this book, it states that a feeling usually lasts about 90 seconds. So we usually go through them quite quickly. So it's important to know that they are not a thing that they're feeling. It's something that we feel, and it's fluid and quickly changing. The last thing on this slide, it says to normalize the response. So it's important for our kids to just be like, to normalize things, right? To let them know that things are okay and that we all experience different things, right? It's okay to feel these things. It's okay to feel this way. And now what are we going to do with them? Because if we can connect that right brain and in an emotional way, if we can connect them, it makes a right to right attunement. So it makes they're ready to then go into the logical part of their brain. So and we can reason with them and plan. Okay, so I want you to think and identify which part of connecting to the right brain you could improve on. You don't have to talk to your neighbor this time. Just kind of think for yourself. You know? How connected are you to your right brain?
Not at all.
See, that's seriously how some of us are. Yes.
I have a question about that. I've heard with ADHD that people that tend to think now and not now, how would you process that with this?
To kind of just slow down with them and maybe Brent can help, but to slow down and to help them identify things, right? Label their emotions, help them to slow down and understand what they're feeling and what they're going through right now. That's one thing that I would recommend. Do you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, with the ADHD brain, I think it's a little more upstairs, downstairs, right? With all kids, we have an underdeveloped frontal lobe. And so we're gonna have a lot more of that impulsive behavior or acting without thinking. And so it's really important with all kids, but especially with kids with ADHD to really, slow them down and say, let's pause, time out. We need to talk about what just happened and help you recognize what just happened, because they're moving so quickly through life that sometimes they don't pick up on those learning moments. And so that can be as simple as like, they didn't realize they hurt the friend's feelings because they're just moving really fast through life. And so you have to slow them down and say, hey, let's take a look at what your friend feels like or what their face looks like and what do you think they're feeling and what do you think that did and how can we maybe make that right? We need to slow down and notice some of these things. So it's slowing them down, helping them process and learn some of those skills, which they absolutely will learn. We just have to kind of help them rewind and slow down and take that moment to stop and learn.
And it's important to do it in the moment too, as much as possible, because sometimes with those brains, it's hard to go back and be like, well, yesterday.
Yeah.
It's really hard for those brains to really put it into perspective when you're having this talk. You know, like, well, I didn't hurt my friend, I didn't push anyone. You know, in life. So, anyways, have those conversations as much as you can.
So like we were in a group therapy where they were talking about like, so if you have your triggering event,
Yeah.
right, and you can name the emotion behind it, you can take the distress out of that triggering event by like 70-80% just by naming it, because you've taken yourself out of the right brain and moved to the left brain, right?
Right.
Using logical thinking
Right.
to name it.
Yep.
And that shuts down the amygdala from
Yep.
taking over.
Yep.
And it shifts you into the left brain where you can start to solve the problem and think about what story were you hearing in your head that caused you to think that way, and then kind of come up with conflict resolution. So they say like naming it is like one of the most powerful things you can do, is having the child learn how to name the emotion, because it takes that out 70 to 80% of the stress.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing with us. That's
I think
awesome.
that's so important.
That's a program called Life Launch. So if you have any older teenagers or children who need help, who have a lot of anger and rage and emotion, it's a really good program. It's like a 12-week intensive outreach.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's so important. And help helping your kids talk about things, talk about their experiences, or even, their anger, their feelings, whatever occurred, helps us to also make sure that their narrative is healthy and is a good outlook, right? If kids don't understand a situation, they're gonna fill in the gaps. They're gonna come up with a narrative, and sometimes you'd be surprised. We have found that, like, oh wow, that is just not, not what occurred, but they fill in a narrative, and they feel so much better when we can talk about it and we can label it, and we can say, well, this, it seems like you felt this, and that helps, the distress go way down. I always say it takes the mystery out of the world for kids. The world is kind of a scary, mysterious place because they are learning so much, and so much is new, or things are being misunderstood or misconstrued. And so the more we can talk to our kids, the more we can make sure their narrative is accurate, and that we can take some of that fear out of things. Like this isn't scary. This is very normal. People feel sad, and people go through hard things, and anger's okay, So just helping them understand these big, uncomfortable feelings are very normal, are good, they're safe, your brain is amazing, it's doing what it should be doing. Let's talk about it, let's label it, and let's help you work through it. So I love that.
Okay, I think we've done a lot of sharing. Ways that you validate experiences, label emotions, or normalize reaction without condoning. Does anybody else have anything else they want to share with
So
how
we'd love to hear from you guys. Like, how do you validate for your kids? How do you help them feel validated? How do you help them label their emotions? Yeah, please.
So in the last 2.5 weeks, we started something with our kids that seems to work incredibly well, at least for validating experiences, which is whenever someone speaks, we repeat back what they say by saying, "Did I hear you right?"
Oh, we love it.
And I repeat it back, or they repeat it back to us.
So like anytime we say, I don't feel heard, and then they're like, oh, did I hear you right?
I love it. That's so great.
And it works really well. So our two oldest, they're 8 and 6. Correct. Yeah, 8 and 6. I'm a dad, right? They were arguing in the back of the car, and I just looked and said, "Hey, it sounds like somebody doesn't feel heard." And they looked at each other, and then they just started doing it to each other, and they figured it out all by themselves. So
Oh my gosh, I love it.
that worked really well.
Guys,
They-
that goes perfectly with our 7 habits, because we talk all the time in our school about seek to understand.
Yep.
Right? Like, before you seek to be understood, let's make sure though that both of you are understood by the other, and that's the best way to problem solve. Oh my gosh, that's perfect. Anyone else? I would love to hear what you guys do to like help your kids with this kind of skill.
We use a lot of the I feel this way when you do this. But then we try to add that part of like to see change, So not just the I feel when or because, but then saying I would like this instead. I want to see this happen, kind of fill in the blanks. So we have that like.
Oh, I like it. I feel this, and I would want this. Which is a great way to help them identify your need, right? What do you need right now?
Right.
And then vocalize that to someone in a respectful, appropriate way.
Right, and so we have this thing in our family where we can't come with necessarily just wanting to complain or vent. We've got to come, and when we listen to the feeling and the emotion behind it, but then we're always saying, okay, now how are we going to solve?
Yeah.
We can't leave this until we solve the conflict. Come up with a resolution. So.
Oh, I love it. That's perfect.
Yes.
Something that we just this week started with our son, because he has a very big imagination and explains his emotions with lots of big stories. And so we've done a lot of telling him that, we really believe that that's exactly how you feel. And that's kind of how the way we just said, we believe that you feel that way. Can you tell us more, and encourage them to keep talking about it and to keep going on, because it is so easy to say, oh, well, but you're okay, or that might not have been what happened, and we try to explain it to them instead of keep talking, keep telling us, we believe exactly what you're saying, because to them it is very real.
Yeah.
Just because we don't understand it, it's so real to them, and we can't figure out what they think if we don't get them to talk to us.
She is big because they're connected. Evolutionarily speaking, I'm an atheist, sorry. We have a gut instinct.
Yes.
And our bodies are made to keep us alive in every situation, including psychological ones. So if we teach our children that they're okay, they're gonna stop trusting that, and that might lead them to extremely dangerous situations. in the future.
100%.
Whether it's socially or physically or whatever, they need that validation. And so, no, it's not okay. That's not how they feel. They need to know and understand that.
Yes, and their perception of a situation, even if it's totally different than our perception, it's still their perception, right? That was their experience, and it's very valid, right? That is what that child experienced. It is what their perception of that is, and sometimes that can be very scary. It can be very, new. It can be just so many things that we didn't realize unless we're asking and we're getting that information from that child. That's a big one I use a lot in my office, especially for our older kids at this school. I don't know what that is, but teenagers tend to feel defensive, like you're not gonna believe them, right? They're telling me stuff like, I know you're not gonna believe me, but I'm like, wait, hold up, I believe you, right? I believe your perception of whatever you're experiencing. Like, you tell me, because you're the one who experienced this, you're the expert on this, right? It was your experience, so I believe you. And then it's like, whoa, they just like relax, and they're like, wait, what, you believe me? Yes, I believe you, because I understand that this is your perception of what happened. I believe that that's what you experienced, we might get a different side from the other person, but that's where we seek to understand and to be understood. It's like, I believe your perception of this. I absolutely believe this is your experience. And that's so great, because that helps them feel like you're a trustworthy person to talk to about it. So that's awesome, thank you.
Any others before we move on?
So in this discussion, I'm being reminded of a book, and everybody's gonna laugh. It's called Never Split the Difference. It's a book written by a former FBI hostage negotiator. And it literally, I'm seeing all the techniques he's putting in the book right here. So I'm just like, all right, so I'll use more of that book on my kids.
Right? Like, this is mediation. Yeah, definitely. And I love that in the book it talks about this needs to happen first, right? If you're like me, or as a behaviorist, I'm kind of like a logic-based person. So if you're like me, you jump into like, okay, what do we need to do? What should you have done? So I have to stop myself and go, okay, first I need to like connect, right? And they need to be validated, and they need to feel like we hear them, and we need to help them understand what they're feeling. Then we can move into, okay, what kind of teaching do we need to do here? What kind of skill building do we need to do? Oh yeah, please.
What do you do if they kind of just get stuck in that and can't move out of it?
So, and that's where that integration piece comes in the book, right? It's like, we're gonna have kids who tend maybe to be in the river on the other side and really be highly emotional or highly emotionally reactive, and it's hard to get them over to this. And I think that's where, well, a couple things. We're gonna go over some ways you can build those areas of the brain and strengthen them. There's some skills you can build on. And I think connecting to that right brain first, but then not forgetting the second piece of like, but also move them into the left brain, move over to the left brain, label and start to plan, and like move them into logic if you can. For some kids, that's gonna take longer than others. And we'll talk about that. Some kids need some time to de-escalate, right? It's like, hey, we've tried, I've connected with you, I've validated, but like at this point, we're gonna probably have to take a break, and you're gonna have to get calm, and we're gonna have to use some de-escalation strategies, and then maybe we'll revisit this and hit the left brain, right? They're not always ready and in that left brain space. Some kids, a lot of us need some time to de-escalate, or need a break, or need some space from the situation, and we can come back together later and reason and logic through it. Does that make sense? So hitting the left brain is the next step. So integrating the left brain would be next. What we want to make sure we do to do that is label the facts, label the facts of what happened, the situation. Here's what I saw, here's what I noticed, or here's, hey, what the teacher reported, here's the facts, what was observed, and then reframing, right? You felt this and experienced this, and that makes sense, right? You were upset. but when you kicked your friend because you were upset, that hurt your friend. So like just reframing it to help them understand the entire situation and help them understand the facts of the situation. And then this is where we connect behavior to consequences. This is where we kind of have to guide them through, like, so this happened and then there was this consequence, right? Your friend wanted to go home because you kicked them, and that's a consequence of being not kind to our friend. So this is where we want to help them connect their behavior to consequences so that they learn. This is where a lot of that teaching and learning comes in. And then we can make a plan for the reaction. Like, so what do we want to do about this? Like, what do you think we should do, and how do we fix this? How do we do some reparative work with that relationship or whatever we're dealing with? So it's just important to hit the right brain first, help them feel validated, maybe even do some de-escalation, get them more calm, then come and make sure you're doing this as well. And that is how we're going to integrate both sides of the brain. So this is kind of in response to what you were asking, is like, how do we develop some of these things? Like, we're dealing with kids who are, you know, continually developing in their brain, and that frontal lobe is always developing, but you know, it's underdeveloped, so we're gonna work on it. So some ways that we can really help our kids develop a full capacity upstairs brain, a full capacity brain, is some guided decision making. So meaning we're gonna ask questions, not necessarily tell them what to do all the time. We're gonna help them kind of start thinking critically and thinking for themselves. So don't rescue, allowing them to grow, allowing experiences that are gonna be uncomfortable, or allowing consequences that are going to be the natural consequence or the social consequence, and it's gonna be uncomfortable. But if we rescue and kind of try to make sure those things don't occur, then we are limiting those pathways that can be built in the brain, right? Our kids learn through positive and negative consequences. They learn what works and what doesn't. And the brain's amazing. It's just trying things, and it's gonna do whatever is helpful for survival. The brain's awesome. But it's also going to learn what works and what doesn't. So with patterns and with experiences, we learn what works, and what doesn't, we learn from consequences. So helping your kids experience consequences, but also asking them guided questions so that they can do some of that thinking, like, what do you think you should do?
So, where do you find the balance between, specifically, I believe in natural consequences. I love the idea, but the second you said social consequences, my insides went, I have tons of social anxiety, and I don't know if that's because my parents just let me do my own thing and try to figure it out on my own, and I never really did a good job at it, or if it's because they tried to guide me too much. I don't think they did. But where's the balance between letting them have the natural consequence and not developing social anxiety like their poor father?
Okay, so you're saying, like, where's the balance of helping them socially and backing off and letting them experience social consequences?
Yeah.
Okay, love it. I think all of that is just based on developmental phase, right? The younger they are, the more we're guiding and really hand-holding every play date, right? Every interaction, we're kind of listening and prompting, and we're guiding and giving them those tips of how to be a nice friend. And we're connecting those dots, right? Like, well, this happened and that's why your friend said this. So we're building those skills, those like social, just like high level social skills. They start really young, right? We have to start really young, and we do a lot of that. I think early foundation. I think when they're young, you're doing a lot of helping and guiding and really connecting dots for them socially, exposing them to a lot of social material like books, stories, maybe scenes in a movie where you can pause it and go, what do you think happened there? Why did this person do that? You know, so just helping them analyze social experiences at an age appropriate level, but helping them understand the behavior of people around them, helping them understand the why behind people do what they do, is gonna really help social situations be less mysterious, right? Social anxiety comes when it's very hard to read social nuance. It's very hard to understand people around me because people are mysterious, and it's really unpredictable for me, and so I'm very uncomfortable, right? And so the more we can make that comfortable, the more we can help them uncover those mysteries and learn some of the reading those things and analyzing those things and responding appropriately, that doesn't mean social anxiety is going to disappear, right? There, we can teach and train and do a ton of researched help, but social anxiety is a very, very real thing that a lot of people experience. It's very, very normal for a lot of people, and so it may still be, I mean, anxiety in itself may still be a part of your child's life or personality or experience, and we just help them work with that. Like, you don't have to hate that about yourself or your brain. I think we all have tendencies of like different things, and I never want a kid to hate something about themselves or their brain, right? I don't want a kid to hate that. It's okay to be like, that's okay, right? We can work with that. You don't have to work against your brain. You can accept your brain and then work with it. Like, okay, so maybe I'm not going to be like having a big barbecue at my house where I'm the center of attention. That would be my nightmare, right? And that's okay. Like, you don't have to try to push yourself to become something you're not. Accepting who you are is, accepting what you experience and what you're comfortable with is really important, while still kind of maybe challenging yourself, but never pushing yourself to the point of always feeling like you're working against your own brain. Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, I hope that helps. I don't know, I mean,
This is like a therapy session.
I love it. But I think this is so good, because there is that fine balance of, I don't want us to send our kids, hang our kids out to dry, right? Because I do think that builds anxiety when you're like not helping your kid and you're like, well, it's social consequences, good luck, you'll learn the hard way. I think we have to really handhold and teach and really help them navigate those difficult situations, but then also not rescue everything, right? If there's friends who are distancing from them because of their behavior, it's okay to say, like, that happens, and maybe we need to figure out different friends, or we need to take a break from a friend, and that's okay. And I know that maybe you don't want to, but I can't rescue you from that. I can't make someone be your friend. And if all of us, if we make a mistake in a relationship, there's going to be consequences where maybe that person takes a break from us. So it's that kind of thing, helping them understand without any shame that, like, these things happen and we just need to learn, and we need to make a plan for what we do next, so that it's not hopefully an anxious feeling with the consequence, it's just a learning opportunity. But great, I love so much of this discussion. You guys are the best.
One more question.
Yeah. Oh,
Her.
okay.
So whenever you don't rescue loud growth, sometimes I think, in my mind, it's saying, well, eventually they'll get to a certain age and then they should just understand because we've gone over so many things. But I think that negates it's the first time experience of it's okay to teach before, because if you're an adult and you're going into a new situation, you would want to be instructed as how to act, right? So I don't think it's age limited.
Exactly.
So I think no matter what age, if it's a new experience, go ahead and do role play or ask questions or think about the situation. How would a person appropriately act?
Yes.
That could eliminate social anxiety to some degree.
I love that, because sometimes we will reach out to parents about some of our older social skills groups or relationship groups, and we'll say, hey, I kind of think this could be good for your student, your child. And sometimes we'll get the response like, my kid does great with social skills. But I think as parents, we need to remember that social skills evolve every year, right? And the social situations evolve every year, and they become more complex every year. And there's definitely certain grades where they become very selective, and they start to really organize themselves into groups, and they organize their play, and it starts to become pretty difficult for some kids to navigate. So social skills are constantly evolving. So you might feel like, my kid's really socially savvy, and that's great, but keep teaching, because every year their social world becomes more complex. So we have to just keep helping them, keep guiding, keep just being a listening ear to help them work through some of that. But I like the idea of asking them, and so that you're guiding them to kind of figure it out themselves, but you're still there to kind of help guide. Developing the upstairs, it's also important to help your children develop a value system, develop their own morality. Asking questions like, would it be right to blah, blah, blah? Would that be right to do that? And how do you feel about that? Just talking open situations with your kids Would it be right to run a red light if it was an emergency? Like, let's talk about that, because there are situations that are complex, right? And it helps to kind of help them develop their own value system, help them talk about their values and what they think is important and how they think about the world around them and their own morality and their own decisions of right and wrong. So just really helping them explore that is really important. Helping them explore empathy and how to care about others. So we do a ton of this, right, in families. It's how did so-and-so feel, and just really helping them be more aware of how people feel or how their actions affect others. Do you guys have any other things you want to talk about to develop more insight or accountability in your kids? Do you guys have any suggestions or things that you felt have worked really well? Yeah, please.
I have a semi-sarcastic one. My wife and I have a difference in opinion on this particular point. I have a philosophy that they'll only do it once. And she keeps telling me that should not apply in certain situations, like sticking a penny in a light socket. However, they'll only do it once. In social situations, it's much the same. Once they've had a negative experience, or once they've had feedback from somebody that they might not necessarily trust or know where they're coming from, that gives them a really good foundation to, like you were saying, decide their own morality, decide what they really think is acceptable and not. Sometimes you just gotta let them stick a penny in a light socket, their eyebrows will grow back.
Well, and that really speaks to what the book is talking about, where like pathways are created in the brain, and we can either deepen those pathways or we can try to reroute it. You know, if your kids have had an experience that we want to kind of reroute that thinking, we need to create a consistent different experience, right, to undo. Or if your kids have a pretty good consistent experience with something, they're going to trust that. They're going to have that be a pretty deep pathway. So that's really hopeful to us as parents. If you're consistent and you're teaching, you know, in the same kind of things like value system or the same experiences, they're going to get it. It's gonna sink in, and those pathways are going to be built. Thank you. That was awesome. More on developing the upstairs, obviously, like learning to control their emotions. So emotional intelligence is huge here. Self-understanding, right? Knowing themselves, understanding why they do what they do, understanding their own needs and what they want, recognizing their body sensations and being aware of their thoughts. So these are all pretty deep, like metacognition things that we're working on with kids, but it's never too early to start. There's a lot of great videos and children's books on helping your kids gain these skills, help them be more aware and mindful of their own mind, their own opinions, their own feelings, their sensations in their body, and like you were saying, like their gut instinct, right? Teaching our kids early to listen to that feeling we all get. Listen to your gut, right? Listen to that. I don't ever want to turn that off. We want to help kids really recognize it and trust themselves and listen to it. And then the book also talks about how exercise and movement is really important for brain development. We know that.
Do you have a list of those books and videos for resources?
I do. In fact, guys, I feel really bad. I shouldn't even admit this, but last year in like May, we did a social skills parent night, and I haven't recorded it yet. So I will record it because I need to and get it on our website. But I have a list in that parent night of how to build social skills, and there's a ton of books and resources and some videos and links. So absolutely, I will get that out. I'll just get the slides out anyway on our next newsletter and our website. But yeah, that PowerPoint has a lot, and it's by age. So I have like younger kids, middle, I've even got high school and older. So there's a lot of resources for building social skills, because I feel like there's so many social skills. It's a huge spectrum of social skills that it's hard to know where to start or what to teach. So that is great. There are some books that are great guides of like what should your kid know at this age, and what social skills should they have semi-mastered at this age, because that's hard for us to know, right? Like, I don't know, should my kid be able to do this? So that's where I love books. They help me to know what's developmentally appropriate to be working on.
I think we really benefit from that, just because like our daughter has a birthday in November, so she's older in the class and she tends to go more towards the younger, and I'm like, oh, like I want you to hang out with people more your age, you know?
Yeah.
Because I don't know if like in
books that just kind of really outline developmentally what social skills should be focusing on and looking at, because I think that does help us to go, oh, I didn't quite realize my kids should probably be doing this. I need to work a little bit more on that.
Okay.
So,
So
and
you'll send the list out?
yes, I will.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. So we've talked about this, kind of like just helping your kids be more aware and gaining more insight into their own behavior, their own thoughts, their own identity, and their own values. So helping them really start to, at any age, start to develop that identity, that sense of who they are, that sense of what they think, and that sense of what their values are, because that's going to help them act accordingly and really help that brain develop fully.
Okay, tantrums. Tantrums are every parent's worst nightmare sometimes. I don't know. Have you ever had your child experience a tantrum, whether it be in public or at home? And what do we do about them? So in this book, it addresses tantrums in two ways. It says there's the upstairs brain, and when the child is having a tantrum with an upstairs brain, they're choosing to be defiant. It's within their circle of control. And the way that we address this is that we set firm boundaries, right? Stand your ground and follow through. So back in the day, they always said there's one way to treat tantrums, and it's just to ignore it. But that's not necessarily the best way to handle it. So with the upstairs tantrums, you really do want to set those boundaries and make sure that you stand your ground. With downstairs tantrums, though, that's where your amygdala is, right? And so when that flips, that's a whole different situation that's going on now. This is where the kid is completely, the frontal lobe is flipped, and they're not able to even reason at all, right? So you've got to get them you got to make sure they're in a safe space, you've got to calm them down, and this is where you meet their most basic needs. So this is where nurturing and soothing and getting them into a more calm space would be very beneficial. Help them feel safe, reassure, give space, and de-escalate first. Now, doing this for the upstairs brain isn't going to work, right? That's not going to be beneficial. But when you do it for your downstairs brain, then that is something that can be really, really super beneficial, because then they can move into the logical. And sometimes it's good to be able to evaluate that there's two different ways to handle these tantrums, and because sometimes with the downstairs brain, they might need sleep and they might need to eat, right? Sometimes they're lacking food, or they're just really overexhausted, and you might need to wait until they are in a better space to be able to talk about what happened and how to do that. So, yes.
I have a comment. I've noticed with my 3-year-old, she'll just start complaining about everything. And I'm like, what is going on? And I've noticed lately the pattern is if she hasn't had morning snuggles, then she starts complaining about everything. And to me, that seems completely unrelated. So I think when you're noticing the downstairs behaviors,
Right.
don't just take it for surface value. Like, notice the patterns.
Right. And so those morning snuggles, right, help her feel like regulated, right, and integrated. Those so that you can then go into the logical phase, right? Very good. Thank you. Yes.
I feel like I've kind of found that for all the tantrums.
Yeah.
If I address it first by just getting down on their level and like hugging them, just
Yes.
what's going on? Like
Help me.
yeah.
I want to be slippery. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
It usually de-escalates itself pretty quickly if you address it
Right.
with a hug. I don't know.
I love that. That's not my kids, but that's awesome if that's your kid. But I think that's important. I think we forget sensory sometimes as a basic need, right? We think like, oh, we need to get this kid sleep and we need to feed this kid. But we forget sensory is a huge piece of the brain's needs, especially for children, right? They need touch, they need safety, they need to feel like they're in a sensory place that works for them. So if it's overstimulating or loud, maybe they need to be in a more quiet place. So sensory is really important. We've got to meet those basic needs before we're probably going to be very successful de-escalating them.
Another thought too is recently I've been having some what I thought were upstairs experiences because they were manifesting in that way, like choosing to be defiant. And then randomly I would ask my boys, "Are you hungry?" And they're like, "Yes, I'm hungry." And it was really a downstairs matter.
Yeah.
So I think thinking about it that way too might help.
That's why I love that. Like explore it, you know, exploring it. We do that with students here. There's times when it looks like a kid is being pretty disrespectful or defiant, but a lot of times we're like, let's make sure they've eaten. Let's make sure they've had a snack, you know, let's get them out of the room, let's take them for a walk, right? They might just be overstimulated. And a lot of times it's sometimes that, you know, it's too much, it's become too much, it's overwhelming. And then they respond in a way that looks really kind of angry or disrespectful, but that's just kids, right? That's how they respond because they don't have the vocabulary to say, this is too much, I need a break. And so we teach that. We try to teach a lot of that vocabulary, but yeah, really watching that child's basic needs and really helping them feel safe and making sure we've met some of those needs first before we jump to like discipline, I think can really help us wire that brain correctly. And so we're not, you know, attaching something that's less in their control than we realize to like discipline. Does that make sense? Okay, sorry, I didn't mean to jump in.
No,
here.
I know. You are so great. I'm grateful for you. Okay, let's see. How do you tell the difference between an upstairs tantrum and a downstairs tantrum in your child? All right, good.
I got that one.
All right, thanks.
Now our kids are not neurotypical. All of them are on the spectrum somewhere, so their tantrums tend to blend in together very well.
Yeah.
But one of the easiest ways to understand the difference between an upstairs and a downstairs tantrum is if the child is capable of communicating what their issue is completely upstairs. It doesn't matter if they're hungry. Yes, that's a downstairs issue, but if they're able to communicate that, totally upstairs. They're realizing they're hungry, and that's what's got them on edge. On the other hand, if they're completely unable to communicate their issue, or they are unable to move away from the fixation of, or unable to move away from the fixation once the issue is clear, you know, they don't get to play video games, and then, you know, you're like, well, you could, and they still have that problem, there's something else going on. That's a downstairs issue. That's all emotion. There's something that you haven't touched on yet. So can't explain upstairs, can't explain downstairs.
I love it. I love that because I'm such an advocate for language development. Like, you have to get your kids advocating at a very young age, right? I'm always like, if a kid says, you know, I'm thirsty, I'm like, what do you need? You know, like, vocalize what you need. Tell me I need a drink. Because we want to start teaching really young. Like, you are recognizing your need, and that's awesome, but what you need to do is vocalize to someone what it is you need or ask for it. Yeah.
So I think like for our daughter, it's you're most of the time, 90% of the time, it's food. Like she's, you know, back talking someone is like, just get some food in her, she'll be a different person. But a couple years ago, she was being like defined at school, defined at home, and we couldn't figure out why. And then we finally realized that some of her friends like hurt her feelings at school, and it was like, oh, not the school, it was home.
But like generalized to home.
But it was like I didn't connect all of that together.
Yeah.
It was something like way deeper. So it's social.
Yeah, and that's where like we love communication from you. If you're seeing different behavior or escalated behavior at home, reach out and talk to us because we might be able to connect some dots, right? Maybe like, or vice versa. If we're seeing something here and we talk to home and find out, oh, like grandma passed away, like, oh, that's a dot we really need to connect for this child so we can help them process and understand why they might be acting out, why they might be so upset or emotional at this time. So yeah, I love that. I love the environments communicating together because kids are a whole being, right? And they're a whole person, and their experiences are going to affect them in their different environments. Yeah.
So I recently shared an experience with the front desk staff. Does that get back to you guys and the teachers?
Yes.
Or
Yep.
dots? Okay.
Yeah, so that they will email usually at the teacher and then also a counselor just to say, hey, just a heads up, this family wanted you guys aware.
Okay.
That's really helpful. We love that because it really helps us be just really aware and sensitive and really help your children and know what mind space they're in and know what they're going through.
Okay, thanks.
Any other comments? important to remember that developmentally appropriate and clear expectations, right? I think we talked about that a little bit, about where is your kid, where are they at? We can't expect them at a 3-year-old to be able to do the things that a 10-year-old does, right? So make sure that your expectations are appropriate to their developmental stage. Predictable environments and consistent responding. This is such a huge piece. Like, routines are very important, especially with the ADHD brain and just for kids in general. Routines are very helpful for them in being able to understand their environment and how they're feeling. Teach emotional intelligence. So in the book, it talks about how emotions come and go, and that's when we talked about how they're kind of, the book, it relates to them as like the weather, like it's rainy, but it's not always going to be raining, right? Or the clouds come, but then they pass through, and that's just kind of how emotions are. They kind of roll, they kind of keep going. Self-awareness is not the same as shame. Yes.
Can I ask a question on that one?
Yes.
As an adult,
Yes.
I have to work through a little bit of what I think is ADHD.
Okay.
And so when I get out of routine, I forget things. And so, or if like something is spontaneous and then it throws me off that routine, I forget things. So I used to live in a bigger city where safety was a little bit of a concern. And so if I forgot to lock a door or something, there would be shame in there. How do you disconnect that from that kind of experience? Because it puts other family members, like we had extended family members with us, it puts them into a panic because all of a sudden they're not feeling safe. And it wasn't because I was trying to hurt them or harm them or cause this reaction in them. How can you, and I felt like really personally attacked in those situations, and there was a lot of shame, like I'm saying. So how can you separate that? So it's just self-awareness without the shame.
Yeah. So what you would do is become self-aware, right? That we all have unique things about us, right? Whether we have an ADHD brain or we're on the spectrum or, something that we're struggling with, is being able to identify with that, right? And maybe, like, if you're thinking about this book as the right of, integrating the whole pieces, the right brain and the left brain, and the upstairs and the downstairs, how can you communicate more, how do you feel about that, and allowing yourself to be, to know that we all have challenges and we all do things and we all make mistakes, and that it's okay to make a mistake. And I think that's super important for kids too, to be able to teach them that we're not going to be perfect all the time, right? And how can we communicate with that, and how can we move on, and how can we learn from that? Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I think that's where we love to teach kids about the brain, because I think neurodiversity is so important to understand at a very young age. Everyone's brain is different, and that's perfect, and everyone's brain is amazing. But understanding that diversity is so important, and understanding and not having it attached to shame. Like, we're diverse, our brains are diverse. I might really struggle with something, and that's not something I need to be really ashamed about because other people don't struggle with it. I just need to be aware of it, right? If I'm aware of something, I can hopefully learn tools to manage it. Being aware of like ADHD is a tremendous strength, because then you can start to go, okay, now I can learn tools to manage it. I have resources of a community online. I can find books. There's a ton of amazing people who've figured out tools. I don't have to reinvent the wheel. I can go find out what's working for other people, There's neurodiversity is amazing, but it also helps us to understand there's a lot of people with similar things that they've learned some fixes for, and I can start going and using those fixes. And so being self-aware, hopefully we can distance from shame, and instead just recognizing that awareness can help us manage things better. But like I said, not be upset about our brain, and instead just be accepting of like, that's how my brain works, and that's okay. I just learned tools to use to work with that, and to work with my brain instead of against it. And that's hard for maybe if people around you aren't understanding that, but I think it's important to maybe connect with people who do understand that, people who are more graceful and give more grace for neurodiversity, and are willing to be more supportive of that, because we're all very unique in our struggles, and we all have them. So, you know, we need to show each other a lot of grace and understand that. But I think understanding our own brain and being self-aware is such a huge power, but we do need to disconnect that from shame. And we have parents struggle with this a little bit. I've got parents who, it's hard because there is a balance, who don't maybe want to help their kids identify their struggles because it's like, well, I don't want them to feel shame. So there is that balance. I absolutely agree. We never want a child to feel shame, but awareness is important. We do want to gently help a child recognize maybe something that's a struggle for them or that they're still working on. And that's where growth mindset language comes in really important, is we're all learning and we're all building skills, and it's okay that we're working on this, or it's okay that right now this is hard or challenging. It won't always be, you know, so that growth mindset of skill building, but helping them with that awareness in a very positive way is important. You know, we definitely want to be careful with shame, but I just don't want parents to feel like because of shame, we're never ever going to help a child recognize some of their struggles and work on them, if that makes sense.
Okay. And the last point that we want to talk about tonight is to avoid the fast forward and forget, but instead to rewind and to remember. And in this book, it talks about how sometimes when there's some major instances that happen in our lives or big experiences, that oftentimes we want to race to just be like, to skip over it, like move on. So if grandma's died, then we went to the funeral, you know, and then it's over and we're moving on. For kids, it talks about the importance of retelling a story and being able to tell it until they get to the part where then they can be either more emotional or more logical about it. So it's important to slow down and to rewind and to remember and to let them talk, I think, and to hear their stories and to hear their perspectives. So any questions on that or comments on any of this from this slide? No? Okay, the last part is let's work together. We're so happy to support your wonderful students here at GWA and to help them. In the very beginning of this book, it talks about how children's brains, because their upstairs brain doesn't develop until their mid-20s, that they are still developing, and it's still learning and growing. And often the children will mirror their own parents' brains. And as parents, as we learn and grow for ourselves, then our kids are able to reap the rewards. So I really appreciate you guys coming tonight, and hopefully you learned something tonight, or hopefully you'll learn something from the book.